Things just took a shocking turn for the New York Mets. It's a good turn for their ace Kodai Senga with his injury, but not so good of a turn for the skip Carlos Mendoza. He has to deal with a lot of problems in the starting rotation, not the least of which being that Kodai Senga is hurt. One of, if not the best pitchers in the National League, is injured, and Mendoza has to deal with that, and a lot of his replacements and a lot of the rotation itself is having some struggles, whether that be statistically or with potential injuries and some injury concerns. So we'll go over all of that today only on Mets Digest. I'm your host today, Mike Duda, and as always, I like to start off with some statistics, and today's stat is that 72.1% of you that watch these videos are not subscribed. So please do me a favor, do us a favor here at Mets Digest, and hit that free subscribe button. That way we can bring content to you about the amazing. So without further ado, let's talk Kodai Senga. This is him when he got injured. Go check out my video from Thursday if you haven't already. That I went over the actual injury itself and what happened to Senga as it broke. But if you didn't watch that video, he got hurt on a play where he was covering first base because Pete Alonso threw a ball high, and he went down like this. He was pulling out that right hamstring. It looked to be a right leg injury and was discerned that is a hamstring problem. But we got some updates on Friday, and we're going to check out this article from David Alder of MLB.com because he goes over a lot about this injury for Kodai Senga. So he said, quote, Senga underwent an MRI on Friday afternoon after being placed on the 15-day injured list. So he was placed on the 15-day IL basically right away when he got hurt after that game, and then he went in for an MRI the next day. We go on with the quote saying, the MRI revealed only a grade 1 hamstring strain, the least severe variety. So that's good. Strains for a muscle range from grade 1 to grade 3. Grade 3 being the worst and grade 1 being the best. Meaning if you have a grade 1 strain, it's not as bad as a grade 2 or a grade 3. So Senga lucked out in the fact that it's a grade 1 strain, but it's still a strain. It's still a strain on a muscle and a very important muscle in the hamstring. Therefore, there is always going to be some concern around a muscle strain, and there's always going to be some time on the injured list, which Senga is unfortunately going to have to spend. But the skip Carlos Mendoza, he feels positive about this. He is in some good thinking as he says, quote, we feel like it's relatively good news here. It's a low-grade strain. Hopefully he's symptom-free and we'll get him back up again. Now this later part reveals to the fact that Senga has to be reevaluated 2 weeks from the injury. They're completely shutting him down from baseball activity for 2 weeks. So he got injured on Thursday, June 12th, so he won't be back until Thursday, June 26th for a reevaluation. And then if he's feeling well enough, they can start revamping him and get him going with his rehab process. However, it's going to take a while. We hear our first quote here from Alder as he says, quote, after the initial shutdown period, Senga will need time to build back up before he's ready to pitch in big league games again. So his return to the Mets rotation could be a month or more away. And unfortunately, in the best situation, this makes a lot of sense coming from Alder because you have to keep in mind it's a 2-week complete shutdown. And when you're an athlete and you're training every single day, basically 7 days a week, and you completely shut down, you need time to build yourself back up and to get back into MLB baseball shape. Keep in mind, these are 780 of the best baseball players in the entire world. They have their regimes and they have to get back to it. And it's especially more difficult for a pitcher because a pitcher is on a very strict routine. He needs to throw at certain times on certain days, and Senga just can't do that at all for 2 weeks. So he has to build back. He's got to start getting himself back into baseball shape. And then from there, he'll start throwing flat grounds. Then he'll throw bullpens. Then he'll throw BP. Then he has to take at least 1, if not 2 minor league starts. And then he will finally be back in the big leagues. So like Alder says, it's going to take a while. And Carlos Mendoza also had something to say about Senga himself. He said, quote, it depends on the player. It's 2 weeks of very little physical activity. Hopefully, I've got to get with the trainers. We keep Senga's arm going during that time, but he's got to be symptom-free before we start ramping him up. Now, Mendoza makes a good point. Technically speaking, what they could do with Senga is have him maybe sit in a chair or just stand and throw and get his arm going. I used to do that when I played. If I had a lower body injury, I would sit in a chair or maybe I'd just stand and throw. That way I keep my arm going. So hopefully they can do this with Senga. as Mendoza said in this quote, and he also feels positive overall. He said, quote, "Now that we've gone through it with the athlete, with Senga, I'm pretty confident in the communication. The feedback from him, we'll continue to listen to him. He's very meticulous about what he does, whether it's rehab, his mechanics, the throwing program. So I feel like we're in a good place, and I'm not anticipating any issues here." And this makes sense. When you go back to his injuries in 2024, he basically had a identical injury, although it was a little bit different. It was on the left side and it was a little bit more up from the hamstring. But Senga, he got hurt last year covering first base in an awkward play like he did this year. The good news about this year compared to last is last year's injury was a high-grade strain. This year is just a low-grade strain. So Mendoza is thinking positively in the sense that, yeah, it's a low-grade strain, so he's probably going to be out for less time. We can work through this a little bit better, and the rotation isn't going to take that much of an impact. However, they might, because we see some other problems with the starting rotation. And the first to go over is Clay Holmes. Now, Holmes has been awesome this year. He's had a really good statistical year, especially because you have to keep in mind he translated from a reliever to a starting pitcher. He transformed himself and made himself a starting pitcher after having a pretty bad year as a closer with the Yankees. Went into that setup role. He was better, and in the offseason, the Mets are like, hey, you're going to be a starting pitcher, and he said fine. He ended up being a starting pitcher, and he has looked really, really good, and he hasn't been short in his outings. He's been throwing a good amount of pitches, but his last two starts, he didn't feel great. We'll go back to the experts here about Clay Holmes and how he was feeling. Alder says, quote, "With Holmes, for example, there's some workload management as he transitions from a reliever to a full season starter. Holmes was lifted after just 79 pitches in a pre-planned 85-pitch max outing after he didn't recover as easily as usual following his last outing against the Rockies in the high altitude of Colorado." Now, here's what Holmes had to say himself about how he was feeling. He said, quote, "I was definitely a little more sore coming out of there. Just normal soreness, but everything was just a little bit more. I think just where we're at in the season and with all the things combined, they didn't really want to play it super aggressive. You trust those decisions. Mendy and pitching coach Jeremy Hefner and the people that know best and have a really good long-term vision." So Holmes is definitely positive about this, and this isn't breaking injury news. This isn't terrible injury news. He was just shorted a little bit in his last outing. But you can make the argument that that caused a loss because Holmes had to be plunked after 79 pitches in his loss against the Rays in 7-5 fashion. And because of that, we went to the bullpen and the bullpen didn't have it. And because of that, because Holmes couldn't go the extra inning, we ended up losing that game. And a lot of people are saying that that is the reason why the Mets ended up getting swept, because they lost that game that they should have won. And then they just really weren't there on the Saturday and Sunday games. So although it's not the worst injury news with Holmes, you could make the argument that it caused 2 more losses, and really that it caused 3 losses and a sweep against the Tampa Bay Rays. So that's unfortunate, and part of the reason why we had such a problem with the bullpen is this guy, Paul Blackburn. He also struggled, and he happened to struggle in that Friday night game back on the 13th of June against the Tampa Bay Rays. He started off great. He was injured, obviously, coming into the season, came back against the Los Angeles Dodgers, and had a great start. Then the Mets used him in relief against the Rockies, and he was shaky, and then he came in this past Friday night against the Rays and just did not have it. Only 1/3 of an inning pitched, 4 hits, and 4 earned runs in what was supposed to be a, quote, tune-up for his start coming on Wednesday in Atlanta. Now, he's still starting in Atlanta. The Mets put Blackburn in this situation because he is the replacement for Kodai Senga. Keep in mind, the Mets and David Stearns were thinking about a 6-man rotation with Blackburn being healthy and Montas and Minaya being on the upside. However, now it's a 5-man rotation because Senga is down and Blackburn is forced to be part of this rotation. Now, you might be asking, where's Minaya? Where's Montas? Sean Minaya is still a little bit away out. I originally predicted he'll be back after the All-Star break, and I still believe that. I think a lot of Met fans would also believe that. But we have another report on Frankie Montas, and unfortunately, it's not a good one. We take another look here from the experts. It's Alder of MLB.com again, and he says, quote, "And Montas, who in theory should be close to return to the Mets and could alleviate some of the pressure of the rotation, has been getting shelled in his rehab starts. Montas allowed 8 earned runs in just an inning and 2/3 in his 5th rehab outing for AAA Syracuse on Friday. Now, we talked about Montas' struggles in the minor leagues earlier. Over his first 12 innings of rehab, he had a 9 ERA, and that is just going to inflate even more given the 8 earned runs in just 1 and 2/3 innings. So, Montas isn't even doing well against the minor league teams, so how is he supposed to be MLB ready? How can he help out this pro roster? He can't. And this is a problem because a lot of other pitchers in this Met rotation just straight up haven't been good. You take a look at the most recent series where the Mets were swept by the Rays, they gave up 24 runs. 13 of them were against starting pitchers, and this is including Clay Holmes, who only gave up 1 run over his 5 innings. The starting pitching just hasn't been good lately. Over that series, they had a 6.92 ERA, and the team overall averaged 8 runs per game given up. A 7-5 loss on Friday night, 8-4 loss on Saturday, 9-0 loss on Sunday yesterday, and these starting pitchers just haven't really been that good. Obviously, Holmes pitched well, but he was on a pitch count. That led to a loss. Griffin Canning, again, was really, really bad. That's now his 4th start out of the last 5 in which he's been bad, like really bad. And this was his worst start of all. Now he has an ERA at 3.8 after giving up a boatload of runs yesterday. And this was a guy who had a 2.5 ERA. I was saying, look at this signing. This was such a sneaky signing. And now he has just been really, really bad of late. So Canning has gone cold. And obviously Tyler McGill has gone cold because he always does that. He always pitches really well in March, April, and maybe a little bit in May, and then just falls off a cliff. And he has done the exact same thing this year. So although the news on Senga is positive, the news on the rotation just really isn't. A lot of injury concerns, a lot of statistical declines. Obviously, Montas is not doing well in the minor leagues and probably isn't ready for the MLB yet because he can't even get minor league batters out. So those are all problems. The Mets just got swept for the first time this season. Now, believe it or not, only the Cincinnati Reds have not gotten swept this year. The Mets had the 2nd longest tenure of not getting swept in 2025. So definitely a good statistic, but they have to wake up, and they have to wake up ASAP. Starting the next 10 games against National League East opponents. Keep in mind, you get 52 division games in a year after the most recent change by Rob Manfred, and now you play every single team in the league. So only 52 division games, and 10 of them are coming up in the next 10 days, starting with tomorrow. So the Mets have to wake up. This rotation has to wake up despite the positive Kodai Senga news. Unfortunately, that's all the time I have for you in today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think about this rotation, about Senga, and anything else that you have to say, maybe about the next 10 days and the fact that the Mets have the most vital part of their schedule so far coming up. And I will see you in the next video, and let's go Mets.